Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host, Brother Robert Johnson.
All right, this is episode 263. This week on the program, I've got Frater O, and we're talking about a lot of things. We really wanted to start talking about the lodge floor as a geometric symbol for all kinds of neat things, but we touched on that and went everywhere else. So, as usual, it was a great conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Before we go into it, we are going to do something a little different in that we will first go into this week's Masonic Minute with illustrious brother Stephen L. Harrison. Then we'll go into the interview, and then we'll wrap the show. So here is this week's Masonic Minute.
I'm not one of those people who says, I don't believe in coincidences. Coincidences happen all the time, and believing they don't, in my opinion, can lead us down that garden path that winds up in the cesspool of conspiracy theory. And if any group knows about the frustration of conspiracies, it's the Freemasons. On the other hand, we've all had experiences where things seem to be coincidental but aren't. Instead, they're a series of events where correlation and causation converge in some mysterious but meaningful way. I just had one of those moments that was, for me personally, so intense, I have to believe the chain of events is more than just some random cosmic episode. My wife Carolyn and I were leaving a cemetery when she spied a name on a tombstone that might have been a family member. It was out of character for us, considering ourselves the two most time-stressed people on earth, to stop and investigate, but we did. Mission accomplished, we headed back toward the car when I spied a family name on the back of a tombstone. Lauer. My thoughts turned to Lewis Gordon Lauer, a man I have written about so much I've felt like I knew him. In 1918, 16-year-old Lewis Lauer lost his father Elmer when he was killed in an accidental fall. Frank Land was Elmer's Masonic brother. He stepped in to help young Lewis. The following year, Land formed the Order of Demolay. He asked Lewis and 8 other young men to join him as the charter members of the organization. Since that time, Lauer has been known as the first Demolay. Lauer went on to a successful career in civic leadership in Kansas City. He was revered in his position as the first Demolay, and some even thought in years to come he would be Frank Land's heir apparent. He was one of the leaders in the effort to clean up the corrupt Kansas City political machine. After accomplishing this, the mayor of Kansas City appointed Lauer as manager of the municipal auditorium. On his way home from a long day of work in the early morning hours of July 18, 1943, a drunken security guard attempting to direct traffic confronted Lauer for driving in the area. Fully within his rights, Lauer challenged the guard for directing traffic while under the influence. The guard responded by pulling out his revolver and shooting Lauer in the chest at point-blank range, killing him instantly. That guard never showed any remorse for his actions. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison, but was paroled after only 3. More than 800 people attended Lauer's funeral. Devastated, Frank Land eulogized his friend and protege, saying, Lewis Lauer was not only the first Demolay in the world, but he was also the first member of the Legion of Honor. He was a symbol to millions of young men of the ideals and teaching of our order. Lewis Lauer today becomes a legend. He will forever be leading the mystical vanguard of youth. Death came with the morning sun shining upon his brow. I continued to reflect on the life of Louis Lauer, who meant so much to De Molay, which has had a significant and positive influence on my life. That's not so common a name, I thought. I'll bet Louis was related to that family. As I kept walking to the car, I turned back to look at the headstones beneath the large granite marker. There, in the center, was one that hit me like a bolt of lightning. It read, Louis G. Lauer, 1902 to 1943. I was standing at the grave of the first De Molay. Was this a random accident, a lucky stab that brought me to a place where I could pay my respects to a man I so admired? Or was it much more meaningful? In this particular case, I don't believe in coincidences. For the Whence Came You podcast, this is Steve Harrison with the Masonic Minute.
Okay, always a great segment with illustrious Brother Stephen L. Harrison. If you like those, please head on over to the WCYpodcast.com website, click on Bookstore, and check out the links to the books from the brothers who have been on this show. And we, of course, have Brother Stephen L. Harrison's books listed there and links straight to Amazon. So please check those out. And with that, let's go right into this week's topic with Frater O. All right, we're back this week with Frater O, and we're going to talk about all kinds of cool stuff and touch on some subjects that we wanted to touch on, but maybe not go too deep into it because we're going to have a brother on the Masonic Roundtable soon at some point who's going to do a presentation kind of thing on this, maybe talk a little bit about his presentation. But in the meantime, we may touch on some interesting parts of this kind of subject. So anyway, welcome back to the program, Frater O.
Oh, it's great to be back. It's I always enjoy our discussions and being able to really allow other brothers kind of pull up a chair or listen on their drive home or to work or wherever they are and just kind of be part of the conversation and listen in.
Yeah, it's really kind of a cool time for me also that we can sit down and just nerd out about wild, esoteric, crazy cool things. So always appreciate the time that we've got. This week, guys, we were going to talk about the lodge floor, as in the geometry of it, maybe the astrology behind it, perhaps the philosophy behind it. And essentially, we thought about it, and Andre Bellevue, who is in New York, does a great presentation on this. I'm told Frater O was telling me about it. Care to tell us a little bit about it?
He does a great presentation, and he backs up a lot of sources from Brother Bromwell's book that we've talked about in the past, and it's awesome. He's a great presenter, really active Mason in the state of New York, and you're in for a treat when he gets on the Masonic Roundtable. But with that said, I'm going to apologize now, brother, but we're going to kind of get into it a little bit, not steal your thunder, and hopefully we can leave some stuff that people can enjoy. But again, if you like what you've heard during our discussion, definitely check it out. Very knowledgeable brother, dives pretty deep, which is great because I know the two of us really enjoyed that kind of topic. But Brother Bromwell wrote an interesting book. I can't really give you the exact dates, but it's called Restoration of Masonic Geometry and Symbology. If you went to the dcsymbols.com site, that's like the book there's some magnificent plates. So the lodge floor is really significant. And when you get over to a lot of the ancient 1700 European buildings, the lodge is laid out uniquely compared to when you get to a lot of these American lodges. I mean, there's always a checkerboard floor in the center. When you get to a lot of lodges here, there's carpet. There's a lot of interesting things that are hidden directly in plain sight in the lodge. And so before we kind of go deeper into Bromwell's book and the lodge itself, Robert, for Masons, a lot of Masons know what we're talking about. But what about those Masons or those people that are thinking about becoming Masons that aren't Masons yet? Do you want to explain what a lodge is to them?
Sure. If you guys ever get to go out to a lodge, perhaps do a tour or something like that. In fact, I'm giving a tour to two gentlemen this upcoming Monday, who are interested in becoming Masons. And one of the things we do is we try to give a tour of the lodge. The lodge is an interesting building. For the most part, we do this thing where the lodge symbolically represents base level, right? We'll talk high level here. So high level as in surface. So high level, the lodge is a representation of the King Solomon's temple built in BCE. It deals with its building, it deals with the lessons and kind of the allegories or the stories that went along with it. Now the inside of the lodge building, while the lodge represents the temple, the inside of the lodge building actually represents what we would kind of determine as maybe the inner sanctum sanctorum at times. You have essentially a seat in the east, a seat in the west, and a seat in the south. And they say there's no seats in the north because King Solomon's temple was so far north of the ecliptic that no sun could get to that part of the building, so they deem it a place of darkness. There's some deeper connotations there that you can dive into later if you ever like. But at the center of the lodge is an altar. That altar is there, and upon it is the book of Holy Scriptures, whatever that might be for you, whatever volume of sacred law you choose when you're about to be obligated, or perhaps you have a lodge that's mostly one religious group. Then they might all choose to have a copy of the Talmud there, or maybe the Bible, which is pretty common here in the United States, or the Quran, or whatever it could be. And there are stations within the lodge, right? So you have a worshipful master who sits in the east. What happens in the east? You get the sun rises in the east. There's a lot of symbology going on. So you got a guy in the south who is the junior warden, and a guy in the west who sits as a senior warden. And the more you kind of dive into the different stations of the lodge, it could be argued that these places, these positions, correspond to deeper ideas. If you're a Mason who is going to visit a lodge for the first time, what you can expect is walking in, and while the typical items in a lodge are supposed to be a checkered floor and a starry decked heaven, right? So there should be like a ceiling that has some painting on it, maybe of the planets and stars, but maybe an altar in the center of the room, some chairs on both sides, a chair in the east, west, and south, maybe a secretary's desk and a treasurer's desk, and some other things going around the lodge there. But more common than not, when you walk in, the floor is usually just carpeted and the ceiling is a drop ceiling. We don't have the luxury of the amazing temples of the past. If you ever get a tour of the Masonic Temple in Detroit, that is truly amazing. The brothers there who give the temple tour will point out various aspects of the lodge that are very symbolical, especially dealing with astrology, which is interesting because it is noted that Manly Hall said there's several layers. Everything's got like these certain amount of layers, right? So you peel them away and there's a deeper level. So these different layers are really interesting. So on the surface, we talk this high level. Master sits in the east. Okay, why? Well, maybe first surface level could be the sun. Another layer down might be something about the Kabbalah or something else, right? Maybe the tree of life going on down. But what we find really interesting in a lot of these really cool books, specifically what we were going to talk about in this episode a little bit, is the geometry in the lodge and possibly some of the astronomy that goes along with it.
Yeah, there's a great website called dcsymbols.com, and it gets into Masonic lore and Bromwell's book. Or if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the two of us. But with that said, it's really significant. During unique time periods throughout history, people that went against, say, the state, or if they went against any religious dogma that was in control of that time period, have it be the age of the revolution or industrial or enlightenment, it's always been, if you've questioned the authority or you've questioned the status quo, there's been very few places where you can go, you can bring up certain constructs or ideas that question all this. And lodges have always existed throughout history where people can go say, I think it might be the planets. The Earth isn't the center of the universe. I think it's much more to it. Look at Galileo, prime example. He was really, really deep. And you mentioned 2 episodes ago the Pythagoreans and Pythagoras and the time period of Greece. So there's always been mystery schools where people that want to really dive deeper and be around like-minded individuals or have certain text or wisdom that's been preserved throughout history, it's a great place. And the lodge is wonderful too. And Thomas Jefferson said it best, I'm going to hide my secrets into geometry so all the knowledge can be preserved and not be lost. Because let's face it, books can be burnt. You can change history by, I think George Orwell said it best, that he who controls the present can control the past, and he who controls the past can control the future. And the best way to preserve knowledge is through symbology and keep that directly in plain sight. And the allegory of King Solomon's temples is a beautiful allegory. And the story of what King Solomon's temple is, and the allegory of it is what Masonry is all about, preserving that wisdom and a really unique allegory and story for the candidate to explore himself. And it's not been spoon-fed to them. It's not told to them. It's presented in a fashion where that individual has to seek for themselves, versus when you get into a lot of these esoteric schools, or if you get into a lot of these religious dogmas or these cults, it's very, very, what's the word I'm looking for? Authoritative?
I would call it authoritative. Yeah, I mean, you've got an element of, well, I mean, if there's dogma, right, then it's essentially, there's an orthodoxy to it. Orthodoxy being an accepted belief that is the right belief. So if you're in any of these kind of side groups, maybe there's an orthodoxy to the belief system. It's one of the reasons why I'll never be able to join, say, the SRICF. Number one, I'm not that cool. But number two, I don't meet the qualification, right? You have to, it's a Christian order, as far as I know. And there's an orthodoxy there. There's a belief system set in place. There's a lot of groups like that, and there's an authoritative type of learning structure. And I think in the Blue Lodge Masonry, like you're saying, it's not always spoon-fed. And with that, that really enables a person to think about it and make their own realizations. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it takes 20 years, sometimes it takes 20 minutes. But I think that's, one of the more beautiful things about the system, obviously.
Absolutely. It's definitely, it's a gardening system, and it plants a seed. And that's up for you listening, if you're not a Mason, to possibly explore. Or if you are a Mason, you haven't found it, well, now's your chance. There's no better time than now.
That's right. What's the quote? The best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is right now.
You mentioned side orders, and just to clarify, for Blue Lodge, again, you don't have, whatever religion you believe in, religion, politics, and business are not spoken about. And we accept all faiths. All we ask you is to believe in a supreme being, whatever that may be, whatever you define that as for you and for you alone. But that's all we ask, is a supreme being. But there's all these side orders that you can join, which are really unique. And like you mentioned, some do have dogma attached to it. And so you could find, if you're into the Kabbalah or if you're into the Zohar, you can find unique orders that are related to those, or more Christian-based orders. It seems like when you get into the York Rite, two major bodies, York Rite and Scottish, York side orders off of York Rite happens to be more, seems like Christian-based.
Yeah, it's definitely more Christian-based all the way through. I mean, your degrees 4, 5, 6, and 7, even 8 and 9 are all kind of Old Testament. And of course, you can hop all over the Red Cross of Constantine, perhaps the SRICF, the Knight Templars, obviously. Those are all mainstream Christianity-based things. It's funny, we were joking a little bit before the program this evening, and one of the things that I found was a brother actually sent me an image of a rites book, which was The Rites of the Kabbalist, and it's a cipher book of a series of degrees. It's about 120 pages. For all I know, until we decipher the whole thing, it could have been a side order Blue Lodge Masons who are really into the Kabbalah, and maybe this was a system of degrees that was on the side for them. I'm not sure. It is one of these early 20th century organizations who, it seems like, entered and then fizzled out.
So let's get back to Bromwell's book, The Restoration. If you can find it, the Grand Lodge of Colorado back in 2010 did a reprint of this book. It's absolutely gorgeous. It used to be on the Grand Lodge's website. It's no longer there. The copies do pop up. I recommend that one if you can find it, because it's usually around like $75 to $50. Otherwise, you're going to be shelling out some hefty coin, anywhere from $400 to $700 for the original edition. But If you do have a Grand Lodge library that is close to you, fortunately, a lot of lodges actually have this. And this is, if you're into geometry, prepare to nerd out, because it's probably one of the best prints and plates that you will ever find on geometry and Freemasonry that exists in all the hundreds of thousands or thousands of books that exist inside of Masonry. And so the lodge is really significant, because before we talked about on how certain orders controlled the continent, or controlled wisdom and knowledge, and they believed that the earth was flat at a time period, or they believed that the earth was rotating around the earth, that it actually, there's a lot of significance on each lodge member and a universe, right? So if you get into the Kabbalah, the study of the atom, right, or Adam Haman, the original man, or do we get into Christianity or mystic Christianity, it talks more about Adam, Adam and Eve, or essentially if you get into Buddhism, it's really just the study of an atom, A-U-M, and it's really significant when you start getting, this is, again, we're diving deep, the study of a universe or the study of an atom. There's really unique correlations, and then if you get into the study of the human body, it seems to be very similar. All three of them. The old saying, as above, so below, it can be applied to all three of those things and so forth. So if you start looking at the lodge as either a universe or an atom or a human body, you'll see, if you want to look at it from a science or religious dogma or spiritual standpoint, you can see all three of them represented directly in plain sight. And there's a lot presented in each 3 degrees. And just because we've taken oaths, and the reason why we take oaths is because it's really important, not because there's some crazy conspiracy that we rule the world, is because ultimately when you're a candidate, that experience is for you and for you alone. No one else. That's for you to experience. And so we take an oath because we don't want to ruin that for anyone else. Because that experience that we all have had, we really can't talk about with a lot of people. Some of one of the best experiences and some of the most significant experiences that you could ever really have. And that's why it's important for us to take oaths, is because it's pretty cool when you're going through these ancient rites that have hidden this ancient symbology and all this history of the mind and the body and the universe and the cosmos directly in plain sight. Now, sometimes it's like drinking through a fire hose, and this was a topic recently on Juan Sepulveda's The Winding Stairs podcast, and it can be difficult. Yeah, absolutely. It takes people hundreds of years or decades sometimes to peel back the layers that have what's been hidden in plain sight. But ultimately, the lodge floor explains a lot with solar allegories and planetary alignments. And again, I don't want to steal a lot from Brother Andre, but we'll put some links to dcsymbols.com and a link to Brother Bromwell's book. And it's interesting to note that the building guilds, the Sons of Solomon, that were the Knights Templars, built a lot of all this same wisdom and all this knowledge into the Gothic cathedrals that have been built all over Europe as well. As well as you can see the same symbology that's been built into the Luxor Temple in Egypt, which they call the Luxor Temple of Man, or the Temple of Man. Or you can find it in certain planetary, or if you get into Hinduism or Buddhism, they have layouts of temples that have all the planetary and solar and lunar alignments, then it's laid out just like a human body. Pretty significant. And if you look at King Solomon's temple, it's very similar. It falls on the same exact page. Basic
level, a lot of the astrology stuff that goes on in the lodge, something that you can grasp right away as just say an EA even, is you'll notice that the senior and junior deacons' rods have either a sun or a moon, and you'll notice that one goes around the altar clockwise and the other one is always counterclockwise. You can make up your own kind of thoughts on that. I won't spell it out for you, but I think it's really interesting, right? And so it's got to go deeper, right? It just has to. And of course it does.
There's another great book you can find for free online. I believe a few people on the round table have mentioned it, but it's Stellar Theology and Masonic Astronomy. In this, especially chapter 5 and chapter 6, when you get into it, the second part of the book, it gets directly into exactly what you talked about. And it's a great read for any Mason or even non-Mason that wants to really explore more of what we're talking about. And it's presented in a very simple fashion that doesn't use big words and it's overwhelming, or it's like a 747 over your head. It really just gets to to the meat and the potatoes of just the idea of Freemasonry, kind of in the whole idea of sun worship and the astronomy aspect.
The sun worship is amazing, and it happens just about all over the world from time immemorial. The sun was one of the emerging religions, and quite honestly, it is still today the basis of most religions. You can decode all you want, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Judaism. It just doesn't matter. A lot of it ties back to ancient sun worship, and it's really interesting stuff. One of the really neat books Frater and I were talking about we were just texting back and forth the other day, was mentioned in an article. And the article was talking about one guy who, I don't think he's a Mason, but he's written a lot of Masonic books. And he had a really great theory that, of course, in the article, it's talking about the Grand Lodge formation, 1717, now probably 1721 if we're up on our dates that have come out just recently. And he says, of course, Freemasonry existed before 1717, and we all know this. This is not a secret. It's very well known and documented. However, what I think he hit on, which was a really interesting concept, is that the organization of Freemasonry seems to be, in the year 1717, was probably like an organized version of ancient craft masonry, and it was an attempt to modernize it and bring it back. I thought the theory was really pretty cool. I'll try to put that link in the show notes as well so you guys can read it. You get about halfway through that paper and it starts talking about that. In fact, almost right away it starts kind of dropping some breadcrumbs for you. But it's a really interesting article, and I found the argument pretty compelling.
Interesting. Well, I haven't seen it, so I look forward to reading the link as well. If you don't mind, I'm going to digress back just a second to the sun worship topic. And it was pretty interesting when you start studying Kundalini with Kundalini yoga, and you start studying ancient Pythagorean cultures. They kind of go hand in hand on how they would wear white robes. They would make sure they didn't have any metals or any sort of jewelry on them at all. They would always, 3 times a day, they would face the east, and they would gaze the sun barefoot, and then midday they would observe the sun at its meridian height, and then toward the end of the day they would also worship the sun towards the end. Now that might sound very familiar to a lot of people, what I just mentioned, and it's pretty significant when you look at that. You kind of have to scratch your head, and that's pretty fascinating. And what is Masonry presenting too? If you're a Mason, look back and just think about what I just said, and start looking at Lodge maybe a little bit differently. There was a link that I just put on my Facebook page that the Huffington Post, of all things, actually started talking about the significance of the pineal gland and sun gazing, and just actually staring at the sun, and actually help managing, I think it was melatonin and serotonin levels in the brain. Really fascinating that such a mainstream publication like that is actually covering fringe or so forth esoteric topics. There's so many documentaries too online if you want to get into sun gazing on people who have gazed at the sun and don't live on any food, and just literally they get all their energy and everything they need from gazing at the sun.
Yeah, it's really an interesting topic, and I don't know how much scientific documentation, what goes on into these kind of studies, but the fact that Huffington Post is covering something in esoteric nature is really interesting. I mean, we're living in times where people are waking up, I would say, to the idea that life is some sort of program, and we need to the better we understand the program, the better our lives become. And I think one of these elements is the realization that there's no money in curing anything, right? So of course a lot of the homeopathic remedies for things and things of that nature, they don't get the coverage, they don't get the news. But it's always interesting when we see something like sun gazing and pineal glands and talking about the production of chemicals in your brain that can literally help you. And this is not new research. I was actually reading an article just recently that was absolutely fascinating, and I never really thought about it this way, that it claimed that the body's natural state is sleeping. And while we sleep, our brain produces acetylcholine, which its effect is it wakes us up, right? And so when we drink coffee and things like that, caffeine's what it does is essentially blocks the body's ability to burn acetylcholine, which is when acetylcholine runs out, we get tired again and we fall asleep. And so I found it interesting that the anomaly is that we're awake, according to this article. Just an interesting way to look at it. And you start thinking about the way the bodies and the brain's chemicals work with exposure to sun and all of the elements that we have on Earth that we're kind of drenched in, right? So the sun, hydrogen, the oxygen we breathe, everything is this perfect clockwork. And it seems like everything we need to survive is really out there for free, but somehow we need to reclaim it. How do you feel about those kind of things?
The journey of self-discovery is one of the most important ones that any person can partake on in the universe. I think it was Aristotle that said it. I once was living my whole life learning how to die, then I realized how to live. I'll rephrase that. It was actually Leonardo da Vinci who said that. And that's just the joy of life. That's polarity, right? You have to go through hell to appreciate the good things in life.
Right.
Or a simple thing.
Another article, to your point, I just read was scientists prove that people who have had a bad trip turn out to be better, even-keeled individuals later in life.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, this is a topic that I thoroughly enjoy. Personally, I've not partaken in psychedelics. I've just been a nerd, and I read about them. I'm fascinated by psychedelics and the effect that it has on the subconscious. And so let's define like a bad trip, right? So most people, they're going to get turned off right now. Mason's going to be like, oh, this is crazy talk. But let's talk about, before we even get into a bad trip, let's talk about psychedelics in general. Psychedelics are substances that actually allow your subconscious to come forward and confront things, right? So we have our subconscious and our waking conscious. So what's that? Like what's conscious and what's subconscious? So conscious is right now, when you're listening to the show, you are present, you are in the vehicle, you are consciously observing or listening to what's going on. So this is waking consciousness. So what's subconscious? Subconscious is the deeper part of your mind, past your ego, that exists, that when you sleep, your subconscious presents things that you run from, or problems or things that you're avoiding that you need to handle. Or when you get into meditation, you're consciously awake and accessing your subconscious. So subconscious is what kind of holds things in. And then if you get really deep into esoteric anatomy, the subconscious and the actual physical body kind of go hand in hand through the 12 cranial nerves into the muscle tissue. That's a topic for another time. But psychedelics actually allow you to access your subconscious or things that are physically residing in muscle tissues or around organs, per example, that you have to face. And so for a bad trip for a lot of people, Jeremy Narby gets into this extensively in his book, The Sacred Serpent, or the Serpent and something about the serpent. Don't hold me to the name of that book. But also Daniel Pinchbeck wrote a really good book. He's a author from the New York Times, as well as he has a TV show on Gala TV, and it's called Breaking Open the Head. And he studies all world religions and all different cults that use psychedelic ceremonies. And it's a great read. I highly recommend it. He studies all different aspects of, the Sufis to Hopi to shamanism and Tibetan red caps to local using psychedelic, psilocybin to peyote to ibogaine when you get into Africa, ayahuasca when you get into more, South American, Peru, right? Anything around the Amazon rainforest. And it's like this shocking initiation comes forward. Like people, like they usually have an ego death. They confront what their waking consciousness, what they think is what is them. And then they have this initiatic experience that Masonry and a lot of these esoteric schools try to present that kind of breaks you out and makes you realize, there's a whole lot more going on besides me just in the driver's seat and this, on this rock that's flying through space.
Totally true. Anybody who's been in a situation where you thought you were going to die and you come out of it, it is so weird and so different. I've experienced it myself. I have a friend who literally died and came back, and he's totally different. He's the same guy, but his outlook, his mental attitude, and the way he treats people is so much different. It's like you've given somebody, I don't know what it is. And I think all initiatic experiences that's the key element, right? It's this ability to be reborn, new eyes, an ego death. That's the real thing. And I think that's true. I experienced it not in the lodge. I experienced it after I had joined the lodge and I had my bout with psychosis. But you come clean of all that, then I didn't know how to deal with it, right? Because this was a consistent thing. I was really having it all the time. I used the HemiSync program and general guided meditations to basically calm my nerves and learn to grab a hold of my life again and take control of my mind. And when I came back from all this, I was a different person. I look at things so much differently today than I ever had in the past. And I think that is so true for really anybody. It's like you would think of some crazy maybe movie, right, about some arcane brotherhood, and you can picture like the grand master of this brotherhood sitting at a desk, right, and maybe this guy brings the new initiate in, and the guy says, close the door, and he says, okay, and he says, you want to be a part of this? And he says, yes, I do. And he's like, do you have what it takes? He's like, yeah. And then the grand master maybe like chokes the guy out and strangles him and brings him back, and he says, now you know. Go forth and live the rest of your life. Like, it's almost like in certain groups when you have a job to do and maybe part of your job is in the water, and in order for you to understand your job, you have to hold your breath for a little while, and then when it's time to come up, you're supposed to raise your hand, and then you raise your hand and the guy who's under the water with you says, nuh-uh, and then you basically almost drowned, and then they bring you out of the water and they say, well, now you know what it's like. You are going to be more focused on, rescuing people or whatever, but there's that initiation into something. It's a really weird concept of death and rebirth. In order to understand it, you have to live it. You have to go through it.
You're absolutely right. You have to. It's a very significant experience, and some people don't need psychedelics. If you get into religion or shamanism, they use the rhythmic drumming to get into trances, or they'll do the rolling dervishes the Sufis do, or they'll be chanting Om when you get into Eastern religions, and some people use holotropic breathing or yoga, or even meditation, or binaural beats, or there's all kinds of other things here. Whatever works for you, it's important, because that is what works for you to have the initiatic experience and find yourself. And sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself. What's that quote? Sometimes you find yourself in the middle of nowhere, and then sometimes in the middle of nowhere you find yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm always like the latter half of that. In the middle of nowhere, I look around and here I am. And I'm always the weird guy. They say you look around you and you got to find which one of your friends is the weird guy, and you look around and you think, all my friends are pretty normal. It's because you're the weird guy. You're the weird one. It's okay.
Ultimately, it's just learning how to take yourself off of autopilot, right? Learning how to grab control of the wheel and drive your dream bus or create your reality. Because in Masonry, we take simple ideas and working tools and apply them to your life to build your future, because ultimately you are the architect of your reality. And for a lot of people, I'm saying that you're the architect of your reality, and that's pretty cliche. But if you think about it, every single action you've done in the past has got you to this point. So at any point in time, you can change who you are or sacrifice who you are for anything that you want to become in life, regardless of whatever aspect of life, or spiritual or conquest or whatever it may be, or financial or business or family based. But Masonry does a wonderful job in presenting those things.
Just recently, Brother Steve L. Harrison, 33rd Degree, did a piece on the Midnight Freemasons just a couple days ago, last Monday actually, and it was called Thoughts Become Things. And he said, thoughts become things when they are given substance with feelings in the mind, right? So this is the idea of the secret, essentially. But what was interesting, he said, good ideas are a dime a dozen. They really are. World peace, that's a great idea. Well, we've been rolling out Visualize World Peace bumper stickers for decades, and we're still visualizing it, aren't we? And so what he's saying here is that nothing happens without work. You put these things in your mind, and you can, destroy the ego, and you can work, and you can become better with the working tools of Freemasonry, but nothing happens without the physical action to take the next step. So a physical action is, of course, just like breathing is a physical action, thinking is also a physical action. But it's an action that should continue to grow, and it should also continue to push you into a place where you are going to make those actionable items in real life. You work hard to get to where you are now in your professional life and your Masonic life, and those tools hopefully have helped you do that, using our 24-inch gauge, to think about your day and organize your day, and maybe the compasses to care about the things that you have a duty to take care of or to have guidance over. So all these great tools that we have, and like Frater is saying, we have this ability to change things when we want. We are the architect, we're the builder, we're the people using the tools, essentially, to literally move forward in life, and everything you do is going to affect the next things that happen. You have to understand that nobody's going to give you anything. You have people out there that'll help you along the way, but even when those people help you, it's because you've done something great already, and they've decided, they see something in you, they're going to help you, right? So it all comes together.
That's an important lesson. What you talked about that's represented in one of the degrees. There's 3 different archetypal figures, right? Faith, hope, and charity. Mm-hmm. Charity being the most important of them all. And so we can always go back to Masonry and present these things, but to tie it all back to what we're talking about, everything you mentioned, The Secret, and that wonderful piece on the Midnight Freemason that Brother Harrison, was it, wrote? Yeah. And we've seen, as a society, we've kind of come more to like a left brain kind of logic kind of species. And if you get into The Secret, or the whole idea of the law of attraction, before it became the law of attraction over the past decade, if you get into the late 1800s, early 1900s, the abdominal brain, which is also called the solar plexus, is so important, right? We get these things called gut feelings all the time, but half the time we don't listen to them, and then we're like, "Whoa, geez, well, I listened to my mind, and it took me off the wrong path or the wrong decision on whatever I needed to make." But we get those gut feelings, and that's pretty important. And the solar plexus there's a reason why it's called the solar plexus. That's where the whole idea of like the root chakra and the bottom of where energy centers are in the human body, where it stems up the spinal column or Jacob's ladder or whatever you want to call it, and how important that is, and how if someone's confident, they're strong, they're solid, they're solid from their gut and or their abdominal brain or solar plexus, and you can find that in a lot of significant books.
I used to do some dangerous work for employment, and I listened to my gut all the time. 7 years. Never got hurt on the job. I learned to listen to my gut, my root instincts, and based on those, then I would go up to my analytical side and go, something in my gut just said, really watch your footing. And then I said, well, why is that? And then I started thinking, like, well, this could happen, and this could happen. Yeah, that was a good idea. I'm really glad I listened to my gut. Our dads told us all the time. We were like, oh, what should we do? Our dads, our grandpas, just listen to your gut, son. That's for real. I have, on several occasions, job interviews, next steps in life. Do I do this? Do I do that? It's as simple as maybe buying a car. Listen to your gut. It's for real. These things are all, anything that affects you and you get that feeling. If you're open to accepting it, the physical cues you get, listen to them. Your body is not going to lie to you. It's actually a really interesting concept that you bring that up.
It whispers. It doesn't scream. It just whispers, and you have to really quiet yourself to hear it. Because if you're not centered, or if you're not really listening, you're not going to hear it. You're just going to pass it by. And it's important to develop that by diet's really important. I know we've talked about that in the past, but what you feed your body, those cells inside of you, repair that, and food goes directly through the GI tract and the abdominal areas, so that's really significant. And exercise and some sort of meditation to help quiet down that monkey mind of ours that loves to go crazy.
It's totally true. You talk about diet, and we hit on diet all the time. I'm sure people are like, guys, get off the diet. I like my cheeseburgers and Italian beefs. Dudes, I do too. But here's the deal, right? I mean, our brains produce chemicals, and those chemicals optimize the way your body works. Your body is the vehicle in which you reside. That body needs certain chemicals. It'll create certain chemicals to push certain processes to function optimally. What are the things that you need to make those chemicals come out in proper amounts and proper operating sequences? What are the things that you need, right? And of course, water. Drink enough water to allow your body to produce what it needs to produce. Eating the right foods and getting the right vitamins in your body to make sure that your body is getting what it needs. A healthy mind can really, truly, I feel like a healthy mind really can't happen without, I'm not going to say like a perfect diet. I'm going to say a healthy mind needs good nutrition. Even if you sit around and you're eating fast food once a day, I think if you're getting the nutritional side you do need, your vitamins, whatever vegetables you need to eat, or whether you take a protein supplement like I do, we talked about Vega, good stuff. And I think it's really essential. I mean, you feel better, right? A friend of mine, actually my brother-in-law, Paul did a special diet that was, it was like a Christian diet. It was called the Daniel diet, I think it was. And he was like a 20-something day diet. And I asked him, how'd you feel? And he said, I felt so incredible. Clear mind. He said the first few days were really rough, right? I mean, no coffee, no nothing. And that's really difficult. You get yourself off of coffee. Now you're dependent on your glands to be like producing what it needs to produce, but it hasn't been producing for so long, so those glands are atrophied because it's like, hey, so I had a friend of mine who was well off, and one day he said to me, RJ, man, I couldn't figure out why my arms were so sore yesterday. And I said, yeah, that's weird. Why? He goes, then I remembered I had to carry my own shopping bags. And as vain as that sounds, I mean, this guy, he's a well-off guy, whatever. I'm not going to judge. And I know everybody out there's going, wow, are you serious right now? Yeah. But anyway, it's the same process. It's like if you're consistently using energy drinks, Red Bull and Monster and coffee and all this stuff, think about what you're putting in. And now your brain's like, oh, I got that. I don't have to produce it. Thanks, man.
And people forget, they think caffeine gives them energy. No, all it does is press the button on the adrenaline glands and just keeps pressing it until that button doesn't work.
Right. And so you get off of it and it's hell. You're super tired. Oh, I need the coffee. I need this. I need that. Well, I like coffee too, man. And I drink it occasionally. But I drink it because I like it. I try not to drink it every day for the same reason. I don't want to have an atrophy in my brain chemistry. I'm really, I think, protective of that. I don't want to have that atrophy of a brain chemistry, because if one day I don't have it, I need to be awake. I don't have to rely on caffeine or something else to bring me back. I got a friend right now, Will, who is working on, he cut off, he used to do 3 of the, I don't know what you want to call it, maybe like a 3 20-ounce thing of coffee in the morning. He'd do 3 of those, and then in the afternoon he'd have a Monster. And he's not doing great, right? End of the day at work, he is really dragging it. And he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm like, just stick to it, man. Stick to it and get some nutrition. It'll get better.
So as it sounds like, I used to work in the marketing departments for a lot of energy drink companies or in the beverage industry for quite some time. And I definitely suffered from extreme adrenaline fatigue before I changed my diet and started changing my life around, taking responsibility for what I ate and what I chose to become, and not emotionally eat or try to press these buttons to get these emotional responses just by simple foods, having food be my drug. And it's very serious. And maybe this might strike a chord with someone who's listening. Maybe not. Maybe you might think we're crazy. But think about this. The ancient Rosicrucian sects, they would only eat plants grown by the sun. Now, why only the sun? Well, because they believed that if you couldn't sun gaze, and if you couldn't absorb the sun naturally and live off that, or same thing with the Pythagorean, or when you get into really Kundalini with the Hinduism, you can absorb it through plants and through food. And so they wouldn't eat any root-bound vegetables and no meat whatsoever, because if you ate meat, in their theory, that's been written about in Vegetarianism and the Occult by C.W. Leadbeater, that you're only going to absorb what the animal ate for nutrition, right? And then so when you start eating these plants that are grown by the sun, there's more nutritious, there's more density, there's more nutrients in it that's going to feed all these trillions and trillions of cells that are on autopilot that we don't even think about as we go through our day in this massive meat suit or flesh suit.
Great points to think about. We'll put some links into the show notes. Hopefully, if you guys have any questions about any of the things we talked about this week, we'll definitely try to answer your questions. By no means are we experts, but we know what's worked for us on several occasions, and that goes for nutritional things, that goes for lodge stuff. If you need advice on working tools or how to implement something in your daily routine, be more than happy to help you out with that. Right now, actually, Whence does a great program with Applied Freemasonry. He does group talk sessions, I think, once a week with I would call it a mentor-mentee thing, but everybody's a mentor and everybody's a mentee in those groups. It's really kind of interesting. And they talk about how to apply the tools of Freemasonry to their day-to-day lives. I'm at the grocery store and the line is too long. I mean, they'll just pick any arbitrary thing that will just piss you off, right? There's 30 lines at the grocery store and there's 2 lanes open and each one has 30 people in it, and you have got a cart full of groceries. How do you apply Freemasonry in that situation, right? So this might be something they talk about, and they're getting really, really good results. Interested in something like that, head on over to appliedfreemasonry.com or thewindingstairs.com, and I'm sure their class might be full right now, but I'm sure he'll open up enrollment for a next session coming up in a few weeks, maybe a month or so. Brother Juan, if you're listening, thanks for what you're doing there. It's very unique and it's needed, so thanks. Any other final thoughts, closing comments?
No, we've covered a lot. I know we kind of took us a while to kind of get off there, but we kind of really in some unique places towards the end. So hopefully you enjoyed listening.
Yeah, it's always fun. We just kind of go all over the place. In the end, use the working tools, learn the lessons, go to lodge, look deep in Freemasonry, and hopefully you find what you're looking for.
Well said.
Well, that's it. I guess we'll cut it for this week, Frater. Thanks again for coming on the show and hanging out and imparting some amazing information that I'm sure we will glean from, hopefully.
Well, thanks for having me back on.
All right, I hope you really enjoyed the conversation. Again, as always, we always kind of go all over the place, and I hope you enjoy that. It's not too much bouncing around for you. Before I leave you this week, I did want to mention a couple really important things. First and foremost, Brother Edgar Alejandro of MasonicRevival.com. You may know him. We have talked about his brand of ties and bow ties, lapel pins. He does all kinds of great stuff. He is going to be at the Grand Lodge sessions for the Grand Lodge, State of Illinois, in just a couple weeks. He's only going to be there one day selling his stuff. That's going to be on the Friday. So October 7th, you're going to want to be at the Grand Lodge. It's really important that you hit up his booth. Not exactly sure where it's going to be yet, but head on down there, and that's a great place to get amazing, contemporary designed Masonic regalia. We're not talking about tired stuff that has the typical square and compass thrown on any old thing. Edgar Alejandro works really, really hard at producing some great stuff, and he's also a brother, of course, and a past master. He knows a lot about the symbolism. He cares about the quality of the product, and I can't say enough great things about it. I will have some great news regarding Masonic Revival probably over the next couple weeks. We may be working together to be able to bring you some really great stuff at a great cost to you, the listeners of the show, perhaps with a coupon code or something of that nature. And so we're going to be hopefully partnering up with Masonic Revival in the near future, and we will be helping to produce episodes of this show. So with that, thanks again to Brother Edgar Alejandro for helping us out here, and for everybody else out there, if you can't make it to Illinois Grand Lodge to check out the booth and share in the fellowship we're going to have over those couple days, please do be a patron to MasonicRevival.com. If you like Masonic podcasts, I gotta mention our favorite other show, the Masonic Roundtable, which goes live every Tuesday at 10/9 Central. We talk about a wide variety of topics. We don't stray away from the difficult topics, as it were. So please check that out again every Tuesday, 10/9 Central. If you just like reading great Masonic stuff, don't forget about the Midnight Freemasons, where we publish 3 articles every week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I did come down late last week. I had a post come off, I think, on a Thursday instead of a Wednesday, or perhaps it went up Wednesday afternoon instead of Wednesday morning. My apologies. I had some sales summit meetings last week, so it was a little bit crazy of a week for me. I also did want to mention, perhaps I may be speaking in the Texas area in January. I'm really looking forward to it. If it comes to fruition, I'll let you guys all know. It should be a really good time if I'm able to be down there. So with all that, that's it for this week. I hope you enjoyed the program. I'll talk to you all next week, and until then, stay on the level. For Whence Came You, I'm Robert Johnson.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry with your host, Brother Robert Johnson. Be sure to join us for our next edition.